Our next speaker is Dr. Beth Lardizabal. I think I pronounced it okay. She's the lead child and adolescent psychiatrist of Alliana Health Systems. She is also the chief of the Department of Psychiatry at United Hospital in St. Paul, Minnesota. She is board certified in adult psychiatry as well as child and adolescent psychiatry. She is a diplomat of the American Board of Integrative Holistic Medicine. She is a member of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and the American Academy of Medical Acupuncture. She is a distinguished fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. Dr. Lardizabal utilizes integrative treatments in her clinical practice, including acupuncture, meditation, nutrition, hypnosis, and EMDR. I'll let her explain what that is. She leads the Resilience Training Program at United Hospital, an 8-week program to treat anxiety and depression, initially created by Dr. Henry Emmons and the Resilience Training Team at the Penny George Institute at Abbott Northwestern Hospital. Please welcome Dr. Lardizabal.
All right. Wow, that sounded impressive to me, but this is too big a room for me, so would people mind if they come a little closer and at least get up and move around, because you guys have been sitting for a long time? And I am very happy to be here. I think this is a great idea. I think Edina is a little bit ahead of the curve, actually. Yeah. So I know who I am, and you know who I am, but I don't know who you are. So I'm pretty curious. I know there's a physician here. I am so glad that you took your Saturday to come. How about other people? Do we have parents? How many parents are here? Okay. How many teachers? Okay, we need a little bit more teacher representation. And a teacher? Kinda? Okay. How about kids? All right, so you guys are the actual experts, so if I say something that's not accurate, I want you to say, hey, no, I don't know if I agree with that, okay? All right, so can we have the next slide? Okay, so the reason I'm here is because this is a big concern for kids and adolescents. I mean, parents worry about mental health and depression, and they have so many questions and so many worries. I think it's really helpful if you could just get some basic information. I have 1 million slides. I don't want to bore you. You're going to numb out and become very tired. But I'd really like to have it be more of a dialogue, and you ask questions, and we talk about it, because it's a huge problem. The one positive thing that I think I can say is that we are at a point in history where people actually are acknowledging mental health. Stigma is becoming less. People are starting to speak out. There's less of a shame. And we know, I like to say, it is the most common disease on the planet. But we don't talk about it. And we hide it. And we're ashamed of it. And we see that it's a character flaw or something we did wrong to have depression. And that's just simply not true. More than 16%, that's a pretty high number in this country, that have what's called a major depressive disorder. That's a clinical depression, and there's different definitions of depression, and we'll talk briefly about that. 14% of kids 15 to 18 have a major depressive disorder. The average age of onset is 15, but I see kids 7, 8, 9 years old that are already having significant depressive symptoms that bring them to my office. Next slide. One of the issues is that there's a high degree of recurrence, relapse we call it. And 40% within 2 years after their first episode, 75% have a second episode in 5 years after their first. Next slide. How do you tell if a kid's depressed? Well, let me tell you, it's a little hard. Kids, especially teenagers, am I right, are not really demonstrative. They don't necessarily come in and say, oh, mom and dad, I'm having this and this and this. They grumble, they grunt, they shrug their shoulders, and that's what I see sometimes when I come in my office. I'm like, how are you? So it takes some skill and some detective work, and you really have to talk to people if you want to know what's going on with your kids. talk to the teachers, talk to their coaches. Next slide. Biology plays a big part of it. We know that biologically, that's the biggest prognostic indicator for depression. So if you have a parent that has depression, that's a very good chance that a child might have depression. Doesn't mean they're going to. Matter of fact, if you have two parents that have schizophrenia, which is a thought disorder, there's about a 25% chance that the child might end up with a thought disorder. But that's actually, pretty good odds. 75% are not going to end up with a thought disorder. And there's a lot of protective factors that we'll talk about. So the stressors, we talked a lot about how stressed kids are. Medical illnesses, social factors, cultural factors, coexisting disorders. We probably won't touch on those too much, but obviously ADHD is a big topic, and maybe I could take some questions about that. So go ahead. We're going to go through the boring slides really fast. So this is the criteria for the DSM, the official Bible, to diagnose depression. And some of those, you would probably say make sense to you. But the one thing I want to point out is for kids and adolescents, it's not depressed mood, it's not sad mood. A lot of the kids are irritable. Okay, so when I come in and I talk to a parent, they say, well, my kid doesn't seem depressed. They're not crying, they're not sad. Well, but boy, are they grumpy. Man, they snap at me. They're mad at everybody. That can be the principal symptom of depression in a child or an adolescent. And sometimes it'll look like labile mood, like they have mood swings, and then everybody starts to worry if they're bipolar. That's not necessarily true. That could be primarily a unipolar mood disorder. So go ahead. I don't want to go through all these slides. This is more of the definition. The problem is, and this is where I get a little concerned, is that the current treatments we have are not always successful. That's not that great. I mean, if we use depression medicine, which are often serotonergic reuptake inhibitors, psychotherapy, there's some good psychotherapies like cognitive behavioral therapy and interpersonal therapy. There's still not as much success as we would like. Okay, next slide. CBTs and medication has been shown to be the most effective treatments. But still there's relapse and there's treatment failure. And the bottom line is very important, I think, to us in the preventative health realm. Most kids don't ever get depressed and they never receive a treatment. But there was an interesting study of questionnaires in primary care's office where they asked if any kids had thought about suicide. A really high number of kids, like 10%, 16%, said they have thought about suicide. Doesn't necessarily mean they have a current depression, but that's concerning, and again, it's under the radar. People don't know about it. That's why people are so concerned about depression. Okay, the third leading cause of death in adolescents. 13%, I forget which study this is from, almost 14% seriously consider. Means that's not a one-time fleeting thought. They're actually thinking about it. Okay, 10 or 11% make suicidal plans. 6% have made an attempt. Next slide. Okay, so on a concrete, practical level, what can we all do? We can make it harder for them to hurt themselves. There was one study that showed that if you delay the impulse of suicide just for 10 or 15 minutes, often it'll pass. They'll talk to somebody. Someone will come in the room and interrupt them. So you could save lives just by making it harder. That means you have to lock up dangerous things. Firearms have to be secured in the homes. Medications, even over-the-counter medicines, which can be fatal, need to be secured. You got to talk about it. It's not going to make them more likely to be suicidal or make a suicide attempt if you talk about it. They actually might be relieved if someone asks, so they can talk about what's happening. Next slide. Watch for behavior. There's lots of different ways that kids show you something without actually saying it, okay? You've heard about, people giving their things away, always listening. When kids are all dressed in black, that's a bit of a warning sign for me, not always, but it makes me want to ask them more questions. And they're very focused on death or violent video games, or they're drawing really disturbing pictures or listening to the most downer music that you could think about, that makes me concerned. Then we talk about comorbid disorders, substance use. If you are using drugs or alcohol, you are so much more likely to actually make an attempt. You have less impulse control and your judgment is impaired. So for parents, you need to come up with a plan. You need to have this discussion before your child becomes suicidal. Hey, are you going to talk to me? If you ever feel so down that you're going to do something, will you talk to me or someone you trust first? Can we make a deal that way? And I think you want to give them the information. Maybe they don't want to talk to you. Maybe they want to talk to a suicide hotline. But that information needs to be available. That's a new mnemonic that my primary care person might like to use when they're screening kids in their clinic. But most people don't want to know all that stuff. But that's the risk factors, okay? SAD persons is the acronym. So go ahead. Okay, so now that's why we're taking this seriously. This is why it's important. So prevention is the key. We're not going to hear about a lot of these kids. You're not going to know. So let's take some steps way ahead of the game and start to prevent depression and promote mental health. Yeah?
Is there any genetic component to suicide in terms of
Yes.
someone had a grandparent or someone
Yes.
passed?
Yeah, it was, yeah, absolutely good, very good point. It was on that last slide. Previous completion. If you have had a parent that completed suicide or grandparent, that's the highest. If you have, say, uncles or cousins, less so, but parent for sure, grandparent also. Very high genetic component, high risk. It definitely flips your radar up. And that's a question we routinely ask in our family histories. So, any other questions at this point? So, yeah.
I have a question. Are there, if your children, sometimes children might talk to other children about their feelings, and what would be your guidance if you do hear something alarming in terms of, approaching parents who you maybe don't even know?
I'd say do it. I would say do it, absolutely. That parent, in some ways it doesn't, they might be shocked or scared or whatever, but I think you would want that for your child, right? Right. Matter of fact, I just had a patient. So what I do every day is I see suicidal kids that have tried to kill themselves or are suicidal and they're on our inpatient unit. So I really get a good idea about how these kids are working. And I had a kid who, it was just this week, his friends were so concerned that they were texting. He was texting all this suicidal stuff that was really freaking his friends out. His friends called the police and said, you got to go check on my friend because I think something bad is going to happen. And so the police came, the parents got involved, and he ended up being admitted to the hospital. But I really have to really give those kids credit because that's taking a risk with your friend. Are you going to snitch? Are you going to do this? No, you're actually saving their lives. And parents, I don't care. If you don't know the parent, if you can make an effort to reach out to them, you could save that kid's life. At least get them on the track to treatment. So very important. And I would not hesitate. And you, I think, are doing the safest, rightest thing for that child. So let's talk about prevention. And we've had some really great talks. I love that Chef Marshall. He really had a lot of good data. Feeding your brain. We just, if we just ate better in this country, we could cut down so much on chronic disease, and maybe Courtney's going to talk about that. But brain health is so important. Did you raise your hand? Okay. So really talking about just changing our diet. There's lots of data about some nutritional supplements. Obviously, fish oil is a big one. All my patients, I ask them to take fish oil because it's very protective for the brain. Lots of data about mood disorders. Exercise is so important, which is why I think you guys sitting this whole time is making me I feel like you should run around, take a couple laps around the auditorium or something. And then sleep is so important. And most of our kids, and someone was talking about, do Edina kids have to get up really early for school? Okay.
Well, the high school has a late start, though. Edina was one of the first in the country
Right. I was going to say there was actually a research study at the University of Minnesota, and I think some schools did change it, right?
Edina, I think, did 96.
Yeah. So they actually took the scientific evidence because they sleep deprived these kids and they put them with like no cues, and they found out naturally adolescents wake up later. So why are we making them get up for the bus and be there at 7 o'clock? It's just not going to work. Plus their sleep latency when they go to sleep is pushed back too. So, yeah.
Is there any research around impact of time spent outdoors?
Yes, green therapy they call it. Yes, and that's totally true. And we talk about green therapy because it promotes the relaxation response, what Maureen was talking about, that kind of settling. And people and the screens, that's not conducive. So spending, and actually it's a couple studies about kids with ADHD, and putting them in open spaces that are green can decrease their level of hyperactivity. So yes, definitely. Yeah.
Screens, probably a question for the schools. Probably the screens are going nowhere.
Yeah.
I find that a big, because, at the end of homework and all that stuff, and there's not really enough time between that and sleep,
Yeah.
it really affects sleep times.
Yeah, definitely. We'll talk about screens later. Okay, so let's go. So this is what Chef Marshall talked about. So go ahead and just eat. Please don't have kids skip breakfast. Don't eat sugar for breakfast like he was talking about. Eat regularly. So go ahead. I will just whip through these. Cut out the crap. There's so much stuff in our food. And there's lots of some good studies about behavioral disturbance in kids that eat processed food with these specific dyes and preservatives. Even kids that don't have ADHD, if you give them some of these preservatives and artificial colors, they'll have increased behavioral disinhibition. So, drink water. Most people are not drinking enough water, and sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and soda, not good. Go ahead. And the Chef Marshall talked about all these things. For brain health, you need protein, you need essential B acids, you need folate. These are essential to make neurotransmitters in the brain. Okay. So, if you have a kid that needs some help, do you give them a pill or do you give them a skill? Let's give them skills first. There was a disturbing study that just came out about kids with ADHD. About only 4 out of 10 got behavioral treatment before they got a stimulant medication. It just doesn't make sense to me. We got to do things that we can do, a skill that they can learn for life, because I don't want kids having to take medications for life. Medications are great, they have really good uses, but we can do other things first. So in all these things, we've talked about some of them. So we'll talk a little bit about the mindfulness piece and how it's with kids. And I do think that we have a right to limit screen time and monitor screen time, because it's just addictive. Just like video games are addictive, you get this huge dopamine release when you get this stimulus, this novel stimulus, and they just want more and they want more. And kids are not at their best at self-regulation, so who has to do the regulation? We do. And they might complain about it, but it's also going to free them up, and they might go have fun in the park or go outside with a friend instead of texting till 3 a.m. The other piece is about really tuning into our bodies. When we're using screens, when we're watching TV, when we're sitting inside, we're not usually paying attention to our body. So exercise is one way to do that, and just becoming aware of our body. That's where some mindfulness practice can come in to help us with body awareness. How am I doing on time? Okay. Sheesh. Okay. It's never enough time. So let me just look here. If you exercise, it improves depression and anxiety. Go ahead. Own your body. I love this stuff. This is Amy Cuddy. Did everybody watch this on YouTube? Her TED Talk? So everybody stand up. I just wanted to make you guys all do this, because you're going to listen to me, right? Because I'm talking. So standing like this, how does that feel? Everybody stand like this. That feels kind of small and sad and weak to me. And this is what I see when I see depressed people. This is what they look like. But if you could be like Linda Carter, how does that feel? That feels pretty good. I feel really good. My self-esteem just increased. It actually somewhere in these slides, it increases your testosterone and lowers your cortisol, your stress hormone, just by doing this. This is not an accident. Yoga practitioners have known this for years. Okay, you guys can stop, but you can keep doing it if you want to. Warrior, if anybody does a warrior pose in yoga. If people do karate and they do a yoi, or if they do aikido and they do a kamae, you feel different in your body. And you can actually use that to help you feel better. So we have to get people to move more and do more things. So let's flip through. I just want to talk about one more piece and then we'll take the rest questions. So you can go ahead and just go through those slides to the RAIN. Okay. So this is an acronym. It's been around for a long time, but Tara Brock is the one who's using it most recently. But we're talking about attention, and we're talking about what John Gottman calls emotional coaching. And if there's one thing you can do for your kid that's going to probably be the most important thing, is teach them how to manage their emotions, how to be with their emotions in a not destructive way. Okay, that's training for all of us. All of us could actually do this. Okay, so it's just like awareness training, it's like mindfulness training. First of all, you have to recognize what's happening. So say you're having a fight with your kid and they just threw everything around and they're really mad because something bad happened at school. First of all, you have to help them recognize what's happening. Because they're flooded with emotion, they have more than one feeling and they're trying to sort it out, but they really don't have the skill set. So you have to recognize what's going on. Point out that they might be feeling mad that their friend did this. They might be feeling sad. They might be feeling angry. And what's important is not to shame them about having emotions, that these are normal emotions and we all have them. And we want to be able to express them. So first of all, recognize. Allow the experience just to be there. Let them be mad or sad. There's no judgment about it, but they need to be able to learn to sit with those feelings. And then start to investigate in a gentle way. You don't want to be shaming or judging or lacking compassion about their experience. So investigate, I wonder what happened. I wonder what was going on. And then just let them be aware of it and help them step back and realize that they are not that feeling. They are not that emotion. It's really helpful for them not to identify that that's what they are. So it's called RAIN, and I like it because it's an easy thing to remember. And if you think about getting overwhelmed, it is like the rain of emotion. And John Gottman does a nice job if you're interested in any parenting books. He's actually a really great couples therapist, but he's doing a lot of good parenting work too. So the important thing I wanted to say, a recent study just came out. So we talked about depressed teenage girls. The girls that had the highest level of depression, the depression that was hardest to treat, they had the highest amount of negativity, self-loathing. They lacked self-compassion. That was the most important indicator, more than just their worthlessness or hopelessness, but they lack self-compassion. So we talk about self-compassion. That's a big piece now, self-acceptance. That's Kristen Neff has done some great work, and I would encourage you to read her book. But if we all could practice self-compassion and self-acceptance, we need to model that for our children. And emotion coaching, that's John Gottman, the RAIN idea that we just talked about. So if you flip to the other pieces, the screen time isolates. We want to have kids live in the world. They need to, if you can help them generate these qualities, they're actually going to do better with their emotions and do better interpersonally. Empathy, which means the world doesn't revolve around me. That's like a teenager, right? We need to help them see others and think about being compassionate toward others and being generous and non-judging. Cyberbullying, criticism is a huge problem. Having non-judgment of others is a quality we need to teach to everyone. And it helps them develop the connections. Okay, and that's just a quote from a very famous Chinese medical text. It's, don't wait to be thirsty before digging a well. Don't wait to become depressed before we start to treat it, okay? Prevent it. And last slide, That's me. So I know if you have any questions, and you might, because we're just very short on time, I welcome you to email me at my email address. Okay? All right. Thank you.